Jack and Ashley have finally admitted what's wrong with Dina. Scott and Abby, they finally slept together, and a gunshot went off right at the last second of the last episode. Stay tuned for this week's Restless Wrap.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Hey everybody, I'm Rachel Goodman, and what a week we've been having with Young and Restless. I can't wait to talk about everything that's happening, especially Dina. You can find me on Instagram or Twitter at Rach Goodman, or on Facebook at Rachel Ann Goodman. We also have our Facebook page at Restless Wrap. So if you want to know when the show's going to be coming on and you want the link to that every week, go ahead and go there at Restless Wrap and like and follow, and you will always know when we're coming on the air. So let's dive in, because just like every week, we have a lot to talk about, especially with Dina, who is kind of sort of now involved in the sex ring. I can't wait to get to our LUL moment. We have a picture this week. I'm so excited for that. In any case, let's kind of jump in and talk about Dina and everything going on with her first. Then we'll kind of go through and get into everything else. So, okay, first, earlier in the week, we were looking at basically Nikki and Ashley, and they were kind of arguing over whose fault it was that Dina slashed Nikki with a knife. Now, here's my issue with this whole sequence. It looked to me like, okay, they were in a party. Everyone saw this happening with the knife. Well, it looked like everyone saw this. And yeah, they were all kind of preoccupied with what was happening with Zach. But you would think that in that particular moment, when Dina slashed Nikki with a knife, that would have caused enough of a commotion where people would have seen. And I personally, I mean, I get that Ashley was defending her mom, but I don't know. Like, I just feel like, one, I feel like Nikki, like, okay, so you know, I am definitely Team Nikki and Team Jack, of course. But I also really like Ashley as a character. So it really hurt me as a viewer to see Nikki and Ashley fighting like that, especially when I didn't know why they were choosing to just, you know, be against each other, when obviously Dina is the problem because she is having a problem. But maybe what they were trying to show is that Ashley wasn't yet ready to recognize that her mom actually did have a problem, which, as we get toward the end of this week, Jack and Ashley do, of course, finally admit that Dina has Alzheimer's. So what do you guys think of how Dina, for everyone that's watching live in the chat, what do you guys think of everything that's going on with Dina? Did you guys know it was Alzheimer's before this moment? Because in my opinion, I don't know how they didn't know it was Alzheimer's, unless, of course, it was just they didn't want to know and they were in denial. So let's get to the chat and see what everyone's been saying. Shout out to Aaron Brody, Amy Caroluzzo, Jacob Marquez, Taylor Jones, Simone Francois, Nikisha Jones, and Hubby Joe. Thank you guys for always joining every week. You guys are great, and definitely my co-hosts. So let's see. Everyone's saying that they definitely enjoyed this week. Simone says, are we going to see a Who's the Daddy storyline with Abby, Scott, and Zach? Before we get into them, I just want to note that Abby, did you guys catch the fact that after she had sex with Scott, she made an offhand comment like, oh, you don't need to worry about being pregnant, I'm on the pill. I almost wonder why they would have thrown that in there, unless they were maybe going to throw in a pregnancy storyline. Who knows? We'll see. Or maybe they threw it in there because they specifically wanted the viewer to realize, no, there will not be a baby. But we'll see what they decide to do with that. Taylor Jones, can my wedding song be the Y&R theme? It's a nice song. That would be a really nice wedding theme. Taylor says, I really feel like with Maddy and Reed, they'll do a teen pregnancy storyline. They might, definitely. Simone says, unless Nikki attacked Dina, a knife did not need to be brought into the equation. I completely agree with you, and that's what I didn't like, is that as all the characters are going back and forth like with this, I will point out Jack took a really neutral stance. He definitely defended Nikki, but at the same time, he kind of defended Dina too in like a different way. So I love how Jack handled this without causing any problems. But when Nikki and Ashley were going back and forth with this, and even Victor wanting to definitely press charges against Dina, yeah, I didn't understand why anyone would say that Nikki provoked it, because it doesn't matter. Words are words. Nikki didn't do anything physical, and to say self-defense, like, that was Dina's big thing. Oh, well, that woman said some things to me, and you know her history. She provoked the entire attack. Yeah, well, I don't buy that, and I personally, the things that Dina's done, I get that she is suffering from a disease, but her logic and reasoning and the things that she always says to Nikki, it actually really gets me annoyed with her, even though I'm not going to say I don't like Dina, because she does have her moments with other characters that are really endearing. But in general, the way she treats Nikki and just some of the things she said, and like how she was acting when people were confronting her about the fact that she slashed someone with a knife. Oh, self-defense. Oh, yes. I don't know. I just don't think that. Her. Instead of, it's like she wasn't taking blame for the things that she was doing. So Taylor says, we are currently in my house teaching my 88-year-old grandma how to use a cell phone, which is funny. I would be curious to see what it would be like. Obviously, we know Dina. We've seen her with a cell phone, but I wonder, too, what it would have been like to go to the store with her and get a cell phone. Doolaman, Maddy is getting on my nerves. Nikisha, yeah, I agree. Aaron Brody, I think that was on, Reed and Maddy are the Romeo and Juliet of the show. Yeah, definitely. I feel like Maddy and Reed are a repeat of JT and Victoria. Aaron, Dina went Norman Bates on Nikki this weekend. I loved it. Yeah, so I guess we can all sort of agree that Nikki definitely, I like that Norman Bates comment a lot. She basically roughed up Nikki. Now, here's the thing, which was hilarious. At first, when we saw Nikki get out of the hospital, she had a neutral bandage on her arm, and I guess before they panned in, it didn't look like anything was on her arm. So my husband and I were watching this, and we were like, wait a minute. This is a day after she got out of the hospital, and she's walking around and she doesn't have a cut or anything or no bandage. But no, then when we looked at it, it was like, okay, no. It's just a neutral bandage, and they did a really good job of covering that up. Okay, so basically, the only other thing to mention about Dina is that she was talking about going back to Paris. The big question became whether or not Jack and Ashley were going to call Paul and turn Dina in for what she had done. But luckily, in my opinion, they did end up calling Paul, even though it was really obvious that Jack and Ashley didn't know if they were doing the right thing. But I'm glad with the decision that they made, because something had to be done about Dina. She was doing too many things that were just kind of reckless. And when we get into the sex ring, we're going to talk about more of that too. But yeah, she was just doing too many things. This is kind of jumping ahead of the sex ring and everything, but toward the end of this week, once they'd taken her away and they kind of brought her back, they put her on house arrest. So under house arrest, Jack called in a psychiatrist, a doctor who was supposed to be one of the best in the industry and had great reviews. So they brought this guy in. I think they said his name was Dr. Bird. And he started interviewing Dina and asking her some simple math questions and simple memory questions. And she, even with the memory, like he would ask her a couple of words and she seemed like she could kind of do it, but then she would forget the 3 words a little bit later on in the conversation. And then she couldn't count back. He wanted her to count backwards by 7, starting with 100, and she couldn't do it. Then what really tipped off Jack is the fact that when the doctor asked Dina to draw a clock, just draw a clock and, have it showing that it's 9. Dina started to do it, and the doctor didn't see the drawing, but Jack was looking over Dina's shoulder and saw it, and basically she put all the numbers on the one side, and that's kind of when Jack and Ashley, when they both looked at this, because Jack didn't want to show anyone, Ashley saw the paper, that's when they realized that they had to admit what was wrong with their mother, and they finally called it Alzheimer's. I love the fact that they are no longer beating around the bush with this, because it was so obvious that this is what was wrong, and at least now that they understand it, they can address it. And it's not a secret anymore. It's not something where they're just going to let their mother walk around without help. It also makes me wonder about Graham now, because a lot of us in the chat too, we were all talking about how we thought maybe Graham was someone from some kind of center. I mean, we know that now he's not from a center, but we had kind of guessed that maybe he was some kind of aide who needed to walk around with Dina because she had Alzheimer's. So I'm wondering now if, even though Graham was sent by his mother, maybe he still was also walking around with her because of the Alzheimer's, and maybe Dina knows and she realized that she needed Graham for that reason. So I'll be curious if Graham does come back and what they're going to do with his character. Because as bad as Graham is, in a way, he didn't mind being around Dina 24/7. So in the chat, we have some people talking about the police. Doolman says, Paul needs to retire. I agree, considering he's not really, with the sex ring, he's not doing what he should be doing. Demo says, GC police can never solve anything in town. Yeah, they can't. Taylor says, the police do nothing in Genoa City. Someone call up Margot in Oakdale or Bo Buchanan in Landview. Aaron says, Dino hasn't been asking for Graham lately. I wonder if she's forgotten about him. Well, let's talk about Graham, everyone. Simone says, I feel for Jack and Ashley because they do not want to believe that Dina has a problem. Definitely. And it's a hard problem to admit that someone has. Not only, living with someone with Alzheimer's and for the ramification of what that means for their mother. Yeah, of course. That's a really hard mental condition to have. Aaron says, the clock looked like something I drew in the first grade. Yeah, it did. And it was kind of funny too, because when the doctor was insisting that Dina draw this, she tried to play it off like, huh, what are you doing? Trying to test my artistic skills? She really, tried to avoid doing that drawing. Taylor says, I feel like the police in Oakdale, I think As the World Turns, were the only real good ones. Taylor, felt so bad after the clock painting, I had goosebumps. Amy Caroluzzo says, her will should be invalid if she was ill when she made it, right? You would think, especially if she had Alzheimer's, that might be a big red flag, and she or Jack might be able to fight the validity of that will. Aaron says, right, they haven't mentioned Graham anymore. Yeah, they haven't. But I feel like he would be pretty important to what's happening with her. Simone, Paul is horrible at his job. It is also a civilian who ends up solving the crime. Yeah, and putting themselves in danger, Scott. And Paul should be way more, doing way more than what he actually is. I feel like whenever we see him, he's just he's just asking other people questions and not really doing anything. The most I ever saw Paul do was when he went to Zach after they had arrested Scott for that, for the murder. when he went to Zach and basically asked him a couple of questions about Scott, but he was asking him questions as if he was, for an alibi, basically, not for anything else. So didn't seem like it was that much that he did. Hubby Joe says Scott should be chief of police. Yeah, Scott should be chief of police. I second that recommendation, and that would be really interesting to have happen. Duelaman, Paul kept Dina on her meds. Graham kept Dina on her meds. Now that he's gone, she's going off the rails. That could be true too. Plus, I have a feeling that it definitely helps someone with Alzheimer's if they do have a familiar person with them at all times. So not having someone, and just like, even though she has Jack and Ashley, they don't follow her around. Like, they do have their own lives. So it's not like she has someone with her all the time helping her. Alan McLaurin says, did you hear that Y&R wants to bring back JT Hellstrom for a domestic abuse story, with JT being the abuser? Huh, interesting. I have not heard that, but if anyone else in the chat has heard that, feel free to chime in with any thoughts on it, or if you think it's going to happen. So, all right, let's get to the big, juicy story of this week, which was everything happening with Zach and the sex ring. So I kind of have this broken into two parts. First, the sex ring in general. We kind of check in with Tessa, who, toward the beginning of the week, who let Crystal run. And at first, she didn't really want to talk about it, but then she kind of does admit the truth that she let Crystal go, which could put her in more danger. If I had been Tessa, I wouldn't have handled it that way, but obviously everyone handles things differently. But I definitely wouldn't have just let Crystal walk away like that without knowing where she was without having someone go with her, because I feel like Crystal did have a really good point. Zach can probably find her anywhere, but if Crystal's with people, then it's probably a better situation for her than if she just goes run somewhere and then Zach finds her alone, which Zach's one crazy guy. What did you guys think of that whole scene with him, the gun, and how he kept waving it in the air? Yeah, we'll get to that, but I had to make that comment now because it was pretty crazy and kind of brilliant at the same time. And that guy, the actor, kudos to you, because you pull off crazy really well. Okay, so meanwhile, Crystal runs off. So then we see Abby and Zach, and basically Zach tries to play off this whole thing like he's not running a sex ring at first. He lies to her again and says that he had a restaurant and that Tessa and Crystal were scamming him and that he fired them, and that's why they're basically out to get him, because he fired these two people because they were not being good to his business. Good for Abby. She knew right away that he wasn't telling the truth because he was running, and that was the big indication, but she's like, I don't believe a word of this. I was like, yes, thank you, because if she didn't believe it, or if she did believe it, let me say that, I would have been really upset with her, because at this point, it is very obvious this guy is bad. So finally, when Abby says, I don't believe you, now Zach turns around and he finally starts telling her the truth. Well, first he starts by explaining it was a massage parlor, not a restaurant, because those things kind of are very similar, right? No, not at all. But then he still claims there's no sex ring. So he's kind of starting to tell her the truth. But now Abby's getting really mad because this guy has just admitted he lied to her. And that's when Zach tries to pull things around even more and say that, oh, no, Abby, by the way, you're in over your head, because Newman Enterprises, they're linked and tied to the sex ring now too, because you guys were funding it. And that's when he kind of basically admits that, yeah, he's not a good guy. Yeah, he had a sex ring. And then, oh my God, he starts basically telling her that he would do anything for her, that he still loves her, and that if she really wanted him to, he would drop the sex ring too. And this guy's performance, the way he was delivering those lines, it made me want to believe him. But it was very obvious he was lying, of course. And I wonder how many girlfriends or wives this Zach person actually has. And if he's this good of an actor, then obviously there are other women he said this to. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if if Abby had kept on, you know, basically going along with Zach and agreed with him and kind of had still, if she hadn't been wise enough to realize that he was lying to her, I almost wonder if eventually Zach would have conned her or tricked her into becoming one of the victims too and ending up in the sex ring. So hubby Joe, I think this is talking about Zach. Zach is only offering a service. The girls are there on their own. And then he says, Zach is a nut job. Yes, because it's only a service. I love how Abby was really adamant about, you know, even though Zach's saying, no, they're there on their free will. Abby was really adamant on saying, no, this is a terrible thing that you're doing. All these people, that's like, you know, a typical story. Oh, the women are there because they want to be. But no. She points out the fact that usually these women are drugged or they are tricked into doing these things, and that Zach is full of BS. So kudos to her for sticking to that and not just believing Zach, even though it must be really hard because this is a guy she was dating for a while, who she was falling in love with, who she wanted to live with. So this has got to be incredibly hard for her. Aaron Brody says, Zach is insanely crazy. Aaron, Zach is insane! Exclamation, 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 etc. Nikisha says, me too, Rachel. I wanted to believe him. Yeah! The whole time, the whole week I wanted to believe him. And then he'd go and do something crazy, and I'd be like, no. Like okay, take a step back. But no, he comes off like a person you want to believe. Simone, when he was trying to say him and Abby are the same and he's the only one who got her, I yelled, don't believe him, girl. Yeah, seriously, because they are not the same. And I love how he was trying to play it off like, oh, Abby, your family, they don't love you, blah, 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 blah. And it didn't work with her for 1 second. Aaron, I can't believe Zach could lie so well. It was scary to watch. Yeah, it was. Taylor, Zach is seriously wild. Sorry, hun, you've been busted. Yeah, he has definitely, because Abby, to me, she's no dummy. Like, she's a pretty smart person. So now that she knows, you can't trick her anymore. So, meanwhile, they're driving. Scott is following them, which I kind of found hard to believe because it isn't like Scott just left and followed them instantly, and if he did, then they didn't really show it like that, in my opinion. It seemed like there was a delay on Scott's end because he stuck around long enough to talk to Sharon. So, in any case, he runs, he's driving after them. He does get to talk to Sharon and Paul and basically say that these people, that Zach is like 2 miles ahead of him. I didn't get that either. If he's 2 miles ahead of you, how do you know where he's going? Where are you even going that you can follow him? It's not like he's 1 car ahead. Also, I found it really convenient that the cell phone would just lose service. And yeah, okay, it was, I see what they were trying to do with that dramatic moment where Sharon's trying to tell Scott she loves him, but it didn't quite make sense to me. It seemed too convenient that suddenly there'd be no cell service. So Scott finally, first Zach and Abby, they finally stop at this place called Roadside, which is convenient because when people pick up Dina, all she keeps saying is, yeah, they found me on Roadside. And so it's kind of a play on words. They think, okay, they found her on the side of the road. And Dina, for some reason, doesn't seem to remember that when she was in the back of a car, she was in the back of a car with Abby and Zach, which I get that she has Alzheimer's, but she doesn't seem, that was another thing I didn't buy. She doesn't seem like she's at that stage where she wouldn't know that Abby and Zach were talking. And if she is at that stage, then I think they needed to show it a little differently because she seems that she can function on a certain level. So the fact that it would take her almost the entire week's worth of episodes to realize, oh, Abby that was in the car. I don't quite buy that. I don't know how you guys feel about that. Let me know. I will read your comments, but I didn't buy it. And it kind of made Dina look really bad, in my opinion, because at first I thought she knew that she was in Abby and Zach's car and knew the whole thing. And the reason she wasn't saying anything was because she didn't want to get in trouble for either what she had done to Nikki, or she didn't want to get in trouble for, I don't know, somehow knowing something she shouldn't know. I'm not quite sure, but that I thought she knew. Like, I didn't think that she was that far along where she wouldn't remember hearing voices in the car. So Abby and Zach go to the storage unit, and Zach is still trying to tell Abby that he really does love her. But now at this point, Abby is taking the stand. She's not going to run away with Zach. She is done. And it looks like Zach, I don't know, he claims he wouldn't hurt her, but it was very like up for debate. But then that's when Scott shows up, of course. And I don't know how he knew they were at roadside if he was 2 miles behind, but he knew. He gets there. He shows up right in the nick of time. But then Scott and Abby, so Zach locks Scott and Abby inside the storage unit. And basically what happens is they're stuck in this place. And as the story's kind of unfolding here, Scott starts to freak out a little bit because of his past experiences being taken hostage, which is very understandable. And this part of the story I really loved. I was like, wow, they did a great job with this. So he is kind of freaking out because of being a prisoner before. Abby comforts him. She holds his hand. Then they kiss, which... okay, I loved the fact that it happened because I really want Abby and Scott to be together. That's like I hope that they get together, and not more than just, you know, sleeping together in a storage unit. But I was a little surprised by how quickly they kissed, and even more surprised by how quickly they slept together. And the music I thought that they were playing, you know, the Y&R music for like if something kind of funny is happening, or not funny per se, but something that, you know, probably shouldn't be happening, but is happening, but it's like a lighthearted moment. That's the music they were playing. And to me, it was like, wait a minute, you guys are locked in a storage and this just happens, which I'm glad it happened. I'm just a little, wasn't expecting that to happen at all, and it took me off guard a lot. So let's see what everyone is saying in the chat. Aaron says, maybe Abby got switched at birth. We need a DNA test done. Lol. That would be interesting. Hubby Joe, they talked until they fell asleep. Doolaman, Ashley stole Victor's sperm to make Abby. Remember, that's right. Aaron, they didn't see Dina in the car when they were driving. That's another question I had. How did you not see a body in the car? Okay, let me just put it this way. If I was driving my car and they have a sedan like me, a 4-door, if I was driving my car and there was a body behind me that wasn't dead, well, okay, even if there was a dead body, any kind of body, let's put it this way. Not that there would be a dead body ever, but you know what I mean. If there was a body in my back seat, like, I would see it. It doesn't matter if they were in the, like, if they were just kind of hanging out in the bottom on the rug, I would still see a body. So, and Zach, how does Zach not know? Of all people, he runs a sex ring. He seems like the kind of guy who would be paying attention to really, like, minuscule details, too. So I didn't get that, and that's a really good point. It's actually really funny, and if I could, I would add it to my LUL moment, but we have some other funny things to mention when that comes up. Doolaman, exactly, Rachel. Yes, thank you. It's not like she was in the trunk. Oh, and here's the other question. How did she get in the car in the first place? I was not sure, because if, let's say Abby and Zach were running and they unlocked, and, you know, Zach unlocked the door, wouldn't they hear the third car door open and close? I don't think Dina's that, like, you know, much of a ninja where she can sneak in and hide in the backseat of someone's car for a relatively long car ride without being seen. And it's Dina. She would have done something. She wouldn't have just been sitting back there. She would have done something kind of crazy. Aaron says, I cried when Scott had a nervous breakdown in the storage unit. Yeah, it was so sad. I felt so bad for him, and I love the fact that Y&R, it shows that it isn't just females, but also males who can cry and have emotional moments, and it is completely normal. And I applaud them for doing that, because there are some shows out there that would never show that because they think that, you know, just because you're a man, you don't cry, and that's ridiculous. So I applaud Y&R for that, and I loved that moment with Scott. It was really touching, and I enjoyed everything that happened. Alan says, how long have you been watching Y&R? I started watching back in May, so I am relatively new to the Y&R universe, but I absolutely love the show. So, but that's a good question. If you're listening and you're in the chat right now, how long have you guys been watching Y&R? I'd love to hear. Okay, so Scott and Abby end up sleeping together. Then, as this is happening, basically Sharon and Paul are sort of figuring out where Scott is, because they looked at Scott's call records from the last call that he made, which was when Scott was talking to Sharon, you know, and Paul, trying to basically say where he was heading. So they figure out generally where Scott was, not quite, because he lost connection before he got to Roadside. And they kind of talked to Dina and realized that Roadside was a place not on the side of the road. And so when they talk to Dina and this all kind of clicks, they finally run out the door and they rush to Roadside. When they get to Roadside, they discover a phone that has presumably exploded, kind of, or combusted, and which had set off the fire alarms and the sprinklers, which notified, I guess, the people who worked at Roadside, and allowed Scott and Abby to get out of the storage unit. Now, I'm curious, at that point, you would think that, I know that Scott, his phone was dead already anyway, but now his phone has definitely not, it's not in working condition anymore. But what about Abby? You would think they went back into, I guess, Scott's car. You would think that Scott would have a portable phone charger if Abby's phone was dead, and that she would think to maybe call her mom or Victor or someone to let them know that she's safe, because she kept saying, oh yes, people are gonna come find me. So she obviously knows she's been gone too long for them to not worry. So you would think that would have been her first thing, and then they would have gone into this motel room and tried to figure out what was going on with Zach. Now, that was the other question I had. I didn't exactly understand what they thought they were going to gain by going in. Well, at least at least Scott, he didn't want Abby to go with him. But even if Scott just goes into this hotel room or motel room, I don't really know what he was trying to get out of it. So if you guys have an idea or any thoughts on that, definitely let me know. I didn't see the point. Obviously, the cops aren't going to help. I agree with that, but I didn't quite understand the plan. What was interesting is when Zach showed up, and at first, Abby was trying to play his game and say, yeah, I do want to go with you. And obviously, I don't know that Scott bought what she was doing or realized what she was doing, but obviously, to me, Abby was lying so that Zach would put the gun down and just take her and go. But then Zach sees this little tiny communication between Scott and Abby, and he realizes that they've slept together, which pretty good from the man who didn't realize a body was in the back of his car. Just saying. Anyway, so then at the end of this whole thing, there's a gun that's been fired, and presumably someone has been shot. Maybe no one's been shot because they went to black, so we don't know. What do you guys think in the chat? Do you think that, who do you think was shot, if anyone? I would personally like to see that it was somehow Zach, somehow. What I was hoping is that Abby was going to get the gun after she kind of tricked Zach into thinking she was going to go with him. I was hoping she was going to get the gun and aim it in his direction, and that would be the end of it. But of course, it couldn't be that easy. Okay, so just real quick here, we should probably mention everything going on with Newman. So Victoria went ahead and put out a statement saying that Abby, the heiress of Newman Enterprises, could have been responsible for this whole sex ring thing, which I thought was pretty bad. And the fact that Victor backed it up, yeah, I'm actually not liking Victoria anymore. I don't know how you guys feel, but I don't think I'm a fan. I used to be, but not the past couple of weeks. Aaron says, I like Scotty with Abby. Me too. Taylor, I've been watching YNR for 14 years. Jacob, I've been watching YNR since 1987, since I was 4 years old. Wow. Simone says, I grew up with my mom watching, but began watching on my own since the summer of 2000. Nikisha, since the 2000s. Wow. Alan, I was 13. Hard to believe that I've been watching YNR since I was a kid. Wow. Hubby Joe says, I was forced to watch it as a kid. Then, since the beginning of the year, with my wife, turned me back onto the show. Yeah, I would be that wife. Alan, I know who was shot, but I don't want to spoil. I'm a day ahead. Ooh, okay. So someone was shot. Simone, I think Zach is shot by somebody, but I do not know who yet. Doolaman, Nick and Sharon. Yeah, I loved the moment that Nick and Sharon had, and I really want them to get back together. I had to throw that in there. Demo, Victoria blaming Abby, not surprised. Amy, Victoria being a witch toward her sis. Yeah. Doolaman, yeah, Victoria has been ticking me off. Amy, been watching since the beginning. That's awesome. So, okay. Let's go ahead and get to our LUL moment. So, as you can see on the screen, I happen to have a couple of screenshots. The first one is Dina's hand popping out of the car because, let me just tell you, I don't think I was supposed to laugh, but when I saw this, I started laughing so hard that I think I cried. Because I wasn't, okay, I didn't know who it was at first, but when I saw the hand, I was like, what is this, a Halloween episode? And then when I saw Dina, I was like, what is happening right now? I think I even yelled at the television, what is going on? And I was laughing so hard, wondering, one, like everyone in the chat's been saying, how did Zach not realize this? How did Abby not realize this? Okay, I'm looking at this car right now, and it does not look that deep. So if I was sitting right in front of Dina, I would see a body. And if I were sitting in the driver's seat, I would see a body. So yeah, I don't understand that at all. But somehow Dina did it, so she must be a ninja at heart, and kudos to her. The other LUL moment I had was later at the coffee shop. It kind of involves Dina too, but I wasn't laughing at Dina. I was laughing because when we were watching Dina, I think she was talking to Billy, and they're sitting in the coffee shop, and through the window door, they see Sharon, and Dina's comment is, why does that woman keep looking at me? And in the background, you see Sharon, and she's basically doing one of these, like wiping down the counter, looking incredibly angry at Dina. It was hilarious, but not as hilarious as the Dina moment. I think that's my favorite, most hilarious moment that I've ever seen on YNR so far. So, all right, I guess we'll... one other thing to mention is that Chelsea got outed for being part of this con ring with Jordan on the Hillary Hour, which, Hillary, why? I get she's pissed off at Jordan, but she really hurt Chelsea for no reason, and I don't blame Chelsea for taking her clothing and leaving that place. I understand what Chelsea did was wrong, but for Hillary to just throw her under the bus like that, and especially someone you're working with, and they've already had this conversation, and obviously Chelsea didn't want to get into it. So just the whole way that Hillary went about it, she claimed she didn't know it was going to be Chelsea in the picture, but come on, Hillary. She knew that Jordan was associated with Chelsea. She probably had an idea of what the woman was going to say because she was reading off a paper, so she probably knew generally because before someone talks on your show, you probably know what they're going to say. So she probably Hillary could probably put 2 and 2 together that it was going to be Chelsea that popped up as this person pretending to be the wife. And then everything going on with Kane, there wasn't too much with Kane, but basically what we did see is that he's having some moments with with Maddy and with Charlie, and they seem to be doing a little bit better. I like Kane a lot more than I did before. I know a couple people in the chat were saying the same thing. Before we leave for the night, let's read a couple more comments. So Demo says, Dina's face. Amy, great writing having Dina in the car. I think it was really interesting. Don't get me wrong. So I am not complaining. I just thought it was really funny. And yeah, the fact that they didn't know she was there, I think is hilarious. Doolaman, but everybody already knew Chelsea used to be a con artist. Yeah, exactly. And so I was a little upset by Nick's reaction to Chelsea, but maybe that'll mean that they break up and Nick will get back with Sharon, which is what I ultimately want. So, Hubby Joe says, the Hillary Hour lasted on air for more than 5 minutes. Yes, it did. Simone, Hillary, aka Mrs. Messy, has forgot her own shady past. Huh, interesting. Aaron, I loved Hillary this week. Amy, that was Naomo Judd, sorry if I said that wrong, as the woman calling in Hillary Hour. Oh, interesting. Nikisha says, me too, love Hillary. Duelman, Kane is getting his sexy back. Aaron, I loved her exposing Jordan and Chelsea this week. Taylor, Hillary is the biggest biche. Alan, what stories do you want to see for Lauren and Michael? I'm curious what's going to happen with Lauren and how she feels about Sharon and I think my biggest question, speaking of Sharon, is how she's going to react when she finds out about what happened with Scott. If Scott's going to tell her, because he seemed to believe he had no plans to tell her. So I don't know, or he seemed to say that he didn't really want Sharon to know. So I think that about wraps up our time for this week. Again, thank you guys in the chat so much for tuning in, and thank you for all the viewers for tuning in. My name is Rachel Goodman. You can find me on Instagram or Twitter at Rach Goodman, or on Facebook at Rachel Ann Goodman. Also, yeah, definitely go over and check out our Facebook page at Restless Wrap. If you like and follow it, you'll know when the shows are going to be with the link, because I always post it on there. Again, thank you guys so much. Until next week, I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and we'll be back next Sunday to discuss next week's Restless Wrap. Thank you guys.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.